Nancy stood rooted in place, eyes wide with disbelief, as she looked at the car she had seen in her mind so many times. She accepted the keys, her fingers trembling as she approached the vehicle. It was her creation, a car born of countless hours of meticulous planning and hard work. She should have been overjoyed, but because of everything Stark had done, she found herself tormented. As her fingers brushed the cool metal of the car, her heart surged with a whirlpool of emotions. Esther reached out and took her hand. "Go on, Nancy. You owe it to yourself to experience this." With a nod, Nancy slid into the car alongside Esther, and a video introduction began playing on the screen. Nancy's voice was thick with nostalgia. "Mark designed this function. Everything is touch-sensitive. He envisioned the seat sensing a passenger's sleep and adapting the car's temperature and ambiance." Tears welled in her eyes as she continued. "All our blood, sweat, and tears. Stark just tied up the loose ends, and now the world thinks it's his masterpiece. Money went into his pocket just so we could sit here right now." Esther pulled Nancy into a comforting embrace. "Sorrow won't serve us, and the people who matter all know the truth about who really built this incredible machine. When you use it, let it be a reminder of everything we intend to take back from him." Nancy nodded, and her voice became firm. "You're right. I'm giving myself a year to get back inside the Franklin Group and face Stark head-on. In the meantime, I need to rally my team. If we can design a car that outshines this one in every way, that will be my ticket." Later that day, Nancy and Esther took her new car to the Diamond Club to talk with Atham about Esther assuming Olivia's identity. As they approached the club, Esther's secret hung in the air like an unexploded bomb. When Nancy and Esther finally entered the private room, they discovered that Latham had brought Jonathan with him. A ripple of anxiety danced across Nancy's face before she sank into the plush sofa and delivered a cordial nod in Jonathan's direction. He responded by silently pouring her a glass of champagne. "Thank you, Jonathan," Nancy murmured, her glaze flickering to Latham. She drew a deep breath, then released the secret she'd been harboring. "Latham, there's more to Esther than meets the eye, and it explains her uncanny resemblance to Olivia. The truth is, they're sisters." Latham's jaw dropped, and he reeled as if he'd taken a body blow. "But when did you?" "Esther and I have been collaborating online for a few years now, and when I first saw Olivia, I couldn't shake how similar they looked. I couldn't find any information linking them together, so I eventually managed to get a strain of Olivia's hair and sent it to Esther for her to test against her own. We still have no idea how they got separated at birth, but we have conclusive proof that they were identical twins." Nancy's voice softened into a remorseful hum. "I'm so sorry for keeping you in the dark, Latham. Esther has made some dangerous enemies, and we were afraid that if anyone found out about their connection, it might expose you and Olivia to risk at a time when she could least defend herself." Jonathan put the pieces together, his voice heavy with realization. "So, your trips to Chicago, they were to meet Esther?" "Yes, so you can see why I had to be quiet about it." Esther cast a tentative glance at Latham and finally spoke up. "I'm unsure whether to address you as my brother-in-law or simply as my brother. I understand how my sudden appearance might have poured salt onto old wounds, but now that you know what we are dealing with, I have a big favor to ask you." "Like you said, you're my family. Just tell me what you need, and if I can give it to you, I will." Esther and Nancy traded a glance, and she took a deep breath. "In order to live safely in New York, I'd like to assume Olivia's identity." Latham expelled a weary sigh, reclining into a soft embrace of the couch. "Admittedly, it will be difficult for me to hear her name again, but I'll get used to it. She's your sister, and if you need her identity, it's yours. You'll have my unwavering support." "Thank you, Latham." The sincerity in Esther's voice was palpable. "No thanks necessary. Come over here, and I'll show you all the records I have from her life." With Esther and Latham digging into Olivia's past, Nancy slipped away to the solitude of the rooftop. She sighed with relief as she overlooked the cityscape when her phone suddenly disrupted her peace. It was Maria's brother Henry, and his voice was threaded with panic. "Sis, it's Dad's company. There's been a disaster. They're talking about jail time. I want to come home from boarding school, but Mom won't let me." Nancy's heart clenched like a fist. "Henry, do you trust me?" "Of course." "Then I need you to try to stay focused on your studies. The burden of our father's crimes should never fall to you. I'll promise I'll make sure you have everything you need." Nancy knew the grim truth, but she couldn't bear to tell Henry over the phone. In reality, the reason Selena wouldn't let Henry come home is that she had already found a new man and was plotting to abandon Henry as well, using Chris's predicament as an opportunity to escape. Nancy had already begun the process of formally adopting him. Henry cut in, sounding more and more emotional. "I can't just ignore what's happening to Dad. Mom said you won't ask Mr. Davis for help. Why not?" Nancy let out a heavy sigh. "Buddy, there's a lot going on that you don't know about. Selena and Dad don't have your best intentions in mind, and that's exactly why I'm not going to ask the Davises for help. It's sad to say, but your father doesn't deserve it. You're old enough for me to be able to be honest with you. We have to face the reality of Dad's situation head on. It's time for us to stand on our own 2 feet and learn to protect the people that truly matter. For you, that means staying in school and continuing your studies. When things settle down, I promise I'll come see you." When Nancy hung up, the cityscape blurred as her eyes welled with tears. Just then, she sensed someone approaching. As Jonathan stepped up beside her, his dark eyes shimmered. "Maria, you broke up with Steve?" "That's correct." Her words were thick with reluctant honesty. "Is it because of me?" She wiped her eyes and averted his gaze, her silence echoing louder than any words. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. "The car you gave me. I appreciate it." A radiant grin blossomed on Jonathan's face. "I'm glad you like it." Nancy offered a firm nod. "It's the most generous thing anyone has ever given to me." His smile broadened even further, the joy infectious. "I want to repay you, and I think I know how I can. As an employee of the Davis Group, I have a request." Jonathan encouraged her with a nod. "I would like to establish an autonomous research lab, self-governing, but delivering exclusively to the Davis Group." "Done." Nancy was caught off guard by his immediate acquiescence. "Don't you want to know why?" Jonathan's smile suddenly turned reminiscent. "Maria, do you remember our conversation at the movie? I expressed my hope that you would spearhead the development of advanced autonomous vehicles for the Davis Group. On a business front, it could provide immense value to our company. On a personal note, I'd be thrilled to support you chasing your dreams." A balmy summer breeze stirred the quiet evening, causing strands of Nancy's hair to dance in the air. One strand landed on Jonathan's shirt, and his proximity to her suddenly became palpable, his gaze intensely personal. A blush crept up Nancy's cheeks, rendering her voice unsteady. "When can we move forward?" "Just give me one night." His words were innocent on the surface, but they bore an intimate tone that made her heart flutter. Nancy took a step back, seeking a respite from his intoxicating presence. She nodded and went back inside to join Esther. The next morning, Nancy woke up to a call from Jack. The gears of change were in motion. He chauffeured her to her team's new base, and she was stunned that Jonathan had found something suitable so quickly. The site was a repurposed factory on the waterfront of South Brooklyn. It was well connected to public transit and offered direct deliveries of industrial goods via boat. Jack turned to her with an inquisitive look. "How do you like it?" Nancy sputtered. It's perfect. I love it. Do you have any alterations in mind? Jonathan had a few preliminary designs made, but you can always make modifications." He handed her a tablet, and she sifted through the designs before settling on one. "This layout will be a good start. We can refine it as we progress." Jack nodded, promptly sending the chosen blueprint to Jonathan. Jonathan also set up autonomous accounts for you with the human resources and finance departments. You and Peter will have complete control over all personnel, and you will report directly to Jonathan, allowing you to concentrate on your work. Nancy nodded. Please thank him for me. Jack paused, seemingly gathering his thoughts. Maria, you should know that Jonathan harbors genuine feelings for you. When he woke up in the hospital in Los Angeles and discovered you'd left, the first thing he did was order Norman to find a helicopter so he could get to you. In all the years I've known him, I've never seen him show so much concern for another person, not even Kim. Nancy's grip involuntarily tightened on the tablet. Do with that what you will. He didn't ask me to tell you all of this. I just thought you should know. With that, he moved ahead. In the future, if you or Peter encounter any issues, you can come straight to me. I'm available around the clock. Nancy nodded in gratitude. We also have a functional employee dormitory if your team should choose to use it. It's fairly basic at the moment, but I'll arrange for all the necessities. A 24-hour security team will be set up within the week, and then the real work can start. She met Jack's gaze, and her expression morphed into a determined grin. Well then, I guess I better call my team. After touring the new research laboratory, Nancy returned to the Davis Group headquarters and used an anonymous email and IP address to contact her former teammates from the Franklin Group. Dear colleagues, after 3 years scattered to the winds, do you wish to sit back as others reap the rewards of our hard work? Or are you ready to join together again and show the world what excellence really looks like? September 15th, 10 a.m. at 106 Douglas Street in Brooklyn, New York. I'll see you then. To assuage any doubts they might have had, Nancy signed off the email with a series of codes that no one in the world knew except for them. A world away at the University of Houston, Professor Benedict had just finished a lecture. As he exited the auditorium, an email notification rang out. Glancing at the anonymous sender, he opened the message. The familiar tone and cryptic codes sent a jolt through him, and he had to lean on the wall for balance. Without a second thought, he typed a swift response. Understood. I'll be there. Back in New York, Nancy sat anxiously awaiting replies. There was a chance her identity would be questioned, but she was willing to risk it if it meant getting her team back together. Suddenly, notification after notification began to pop up on her screen. Professor Benedict wrote, Understood. I'll be there. Jeff chimed in. What took you so long? Mark added, I'll see you soon. A tear slipped down Nancy's cheek as she read the responses, and a defiant smile played on her lips. As Nancy and the taller men stared at each other, Esther turned to Brock. This is my dear friend Maria. Maria, this is Brock. What a lovely name. Where did you two meet? Esther chimed in. Online, actually. We only recently met in person for the first time. She then turned to Nancy. Maria, this is Brock. He's helping me expand my perfume company here in New York. And that tall drink of water is Austin. Nancy acknowledged Brock with a curt nod, then shifted her gaze back to Austin again. A playful smirk danced on her lips. Austin it is. You failed to mention that when you were hitting on me at the airport. I was just making sure you were alive. You look like you had walked off the set of a zombie movie. I see. You were just a concerned citizen, hoping to help a damsel in distress. Before Austin could defend himself, a familiar voice cut in. Maria, why don't you introduce me to your aspiring lover? I'd love to know who my competition is. Jonathan maneuvered his wheelchair next to her and took her hand into his. She tried to wriggle free, but he tightened his grip. He knew he was betting on her not wanting to cause a scene in public, but she had another way of getting back at him. Austin and I met at the airport when I was on my way back from Los Angeles. You were supposed to be there, but then you made other plans. What were they again? Jonathan's body tensed, and she could tell she had landed her jab. He looked at Austin, but betrayed nothing. Thank you for helping her get back safely. Just then, Brock broke in. I'm surprised to see you here, Mr. Davis. What happened to your leg? I don't recall any news about it. Jonathan met his gaze and briefly paused. It was obvious to Nancy from their body language that they were rivals with no love lost. But Jonathan looked unruffled. Maria and I were in LA, negotiating an acquisition when the earthquake hit last week. Just a minor injury, though. I'll be back on my feet in no time. He then turned to Nancy, subtly marking his territory. You should get another checkup as well. I'll take you on your way home. Nancy took a deep breath, her mind swirling with silent protests, but she managed a silent nod. Sounds good. Brock smiled wryly. Well, I'm just glad to see you're looking out for your health, Jonathan. If you decide to take some time off, let me know. I've got some great recommendations for places you can rest and recover. Taking a break isn't a sign of weakness. That won't be necessary. Suit yourself. Shall we get going, Esther? You must be tired from the trip. Esther nodded and hugged Nancy, whispering in her ear. Meet me at the hotel later. Jonathan acknowledged him with a slight nod. Despite his wheelchair, he still exuded a domineering aura. Let's go, Maria. Nancy got into the car without a word, and as soon as she was seated, Jonathan hoisted himself into the back seat right beside her. She scooted over and glared at him. What the hell was that? I thought I made myself clear. You did. I just overheard that he was trying to flirt with you, and I got jealous. As Jack started the car and they pulled away, Jonathan turned to look at the view of Manhattan in the distance. They didn't say a word to each other, and when Jack finally got close enough to Nancy's dorm for her to walk, she snapped at him to let her out. She'd had enough of Jonathan treating her like a caged animal. Later that night, Nancy went to meet Esther at her hotel, where she discovered that Brock had rented her a huge, luxurious suite. As soon as Nancy crossed the threshold, Esther broke into a dramatic revelation. So you know Austin? That's the boyfriend I just broke up with. Nancy sputtered, struck between laughter and bewilderment. I'm sorry, what? You dated that hipster doofus Kendall? I thought you said you just got your sight back. Esther sighed, a theatrical air to her words. He was like a fly I couldn't swat away. We made a bet. If I couldn't find a boyfriend within 6 months of recovering my sight, I'd give him a chance. Good riddance, though. Especially if he's trying to pick up every hag at LAX. Hey now, I had just survived an earthquake. Esther winked. That's what they all say. What about Brock? What's his deal? Esther's expression hardened. He seems like a showboat at first, but he can be ruthless. Definitely not someone you want to cross. But I can't touch any of my old accounts without tipping off Stark, so I needed funding for my perfume company. And here we are. Do you think he's dangerous? Not for me. He has to have legit businesses to hide whatever else he's got going on. So he needs me as much as I need him. I'm just trying not to get involved in this shady stuff. I have more than myself to consider after all. I can't put my parents in the crossfire. Nancy nodded, suddenly realizing how similar her and Esther's situations were. The difference was that Esther still actually had a family. As Nancy got caught up in memories, Esther suddenly turned to her with a determined look. Speaking of not raising suspicion, I've been hashing out a plan with Brock. We're looking to headquarter our company here in New York, but if I'm going to stick around long term, I can't use my own name. Brock proposed crafting a whole new identity, but I'm worried it would be hard to make one up from scratch that would stand up to Stark scrutiny. So I'm thinking about asking Latham if I can be Olivia instead. Nancy's eyes lit up like fireworks. That's genius! Olivia's family are all gone, and she had a spotless record. Latham even paid off all her debts. Even if Spark sees a picture of you and turns detective, he would never be able to connect the dots. Besides, now that he's neck deep in his big car release, he'll probably be distracted for a while. Esther nodded. Perfect. Brock and I have a press conference planned for 2 days from now, and we'd love to announce the new headquarters. Do you think we could talk to Latham by then? Of course. I'll make it happen. The next day, Jonathan received permission from his doctor to stop using the wheelchair. He still required breaks, though, so on the way back from lunch, he stopped at the employee break room to rest. As he got close, He overheard the idle chatter of a few secretaries. Has anyone else noticed that Maria's been conspicuously absent from Jonathan's inner circle lately? Jonathan's brows knitted together. He thought they'd been so careful when Maria joined him for meals. Another secretary chimed in. Isn't it obvious? She broke up with Steve. Why would she still be the golden child after that? What? They broke up? When did this happen? Do you live under a rock? It happened a week ago. I even heard from the girls downstairs that they were never really a couple to begin with, and Steve just pretended to date her as a favor. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. Why hadn't Maria told him that she broke up with him? And was it really a fake relationship? That doesn't sound true. Why would someone as powerful as Steve need to do that? A third secretary chimed in. It's true, I swear. I heard directly from his personal secretary that his exact words were, "We can't break up because we were never together." I don't see what's in it for him. Are you kidding? He got to fool around with a gorgeous 20-year-old whenever he wanted. Tale as old as time. Jonathan snarled as he listened. Just the thought of Maria and Steve being intimate made his blood boil. I'm not buying it. Did you see the way he always looked at her? It seemed like he didn't even like her. Come to think of it, has anyone ever seen him around a woman he did seem to like? Makes you wonder. Shh, keep it down. Her voice got even quieter. Between us, though, I could say the same thing for Jonathan. They all exchanged knowing smiles, their eyes gleaming with shared mischief. However, as they stood to leave, they spotted a commanding figure looming in the doorway. Taken aback, one of them dropped their coffee and spilled it everywhere. Mr. Davis, would you like some coffee? Jonathan leaned casually against the doorframe, his voice frosty. Did Steve and Maria part ways? A secretary, visibly shaken, stammered. Jonathan, we apologize. We shouldn't have been gossiping about you and Steve. Jonathan took a step closer, his voice icy and detached. That's not what I asked. The secretary, nearly in tears, whispered, Yes, they broke up. And when did this occur? Another secretary piped in, her voice barely audible. About a week ago. That's when I heard it at least. But it's just a rumor. Jonathan's response was a simple, elongated, oh. His lips curled into a satisfied smile, lost on the women who were too terrified to meet his gaze. Still smiling, he said, Milk, no sugar. What? You asked if I wanted some coffee. Milk, no sugar. With that, he spun on his heels and headed for the door. As he exited, he shouted one more thing over his shoulder. And get Jack into my office. I need him to go buy someone a present. For the next few days, Nancy and Esther shared her luxurious suite. It was 10 times larger than Nancy's dorm room, and Brock was covering everything. On her third day at the hotel, Nancy awoke to the smell of fresh flowers. She murmured and opened her eyes to see Esther standing over her with a vibrant bouquet. The early sun illuminated her face and highlighted her joy. Happy birthday, Nancy! Tears sprang to Nancy's eyes as she accepted the flowers and embraced Esther tightly. I can't believe you remembered. Are you kidding? You used to talk about your birthday 365 days a year. It's tattooed on my brain. Nancy gazed at the flowers. Esther was the only person on Earth who knew it was really her birthday, and they all had been reunited just in time to spend it together. For the first time in a long time, she felt genuinely lucky. After a birthday breakfast in the hotel, they were about to leave the restaurant when a valet attendant approached them. Excuse me, is one of you Maria Miller? Nancy acknowledged with a nod. Miss Miller, a man named Jack just left a gift for you out front. He asked me to direct you to the main entrance to receive it. Nancy and Esther exchanged puzzling glances, but decided to investigate. It was obviously from Jonathan, but she couldn't imagine what he had sent or why. There was no way he knew it was her birthday. Upon reaching the main entrance, Nancy froze in her tracks and her jaw dropped. She was staring at a striking, fire-red car parked directly in front of the hotel's lobby. Its sleek design took her breath away, and the front grille was emblazoned with an unmistakable logo: a phoenix. This was Nancy's self-driving car. The following day marked the grand unveiling of Esther's flagship perfume store in Times Square, Unique Perfumes. Thanks to Brock's publicity skills, the street was jammed with anxious shoppers before dawn, and the entire block thrummed with anticipation for the hottest new name in fashion. The stroke of 10 saw the doors open, and Esther and Latham watched from the side as a spokesperson stepped out to make an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this landmark day at our flagship store in the heart of Manhattan. This isn't just Unique's first physical presence, it's also the first of its kind anywhere in the world. Thanks to our innovation, self-serving mixing stations that uses your own biomarkers to craft scents, you will never smell like any other woman ever again. That's the Unique guarantee. Enjoy. As crowds rushed into the store and camera flashes ricocheted off the polished surfaces, Latham leaned in to whisper to Esther, his mouth stretched tight in a forlorn smile. You know, back in our college days, I scrimped and saved for weeks to buy a bottle of perfume for Olivia. She chided me for spending so much on her and forced me to return it. A soft sigh escaped him. I vowed to her that when I had the means, I'd gift her an entire perfume empire. A shadow of regret passed over Esther's face as she took in the scene. I'm sorry I didn't make it back sooner. We could have given it to her together. Esther looked around at the LED screens, glittering with her company's slogan, Unique Perfumes for the Unique You. She couldn't believe that she had made it this far after everything that had happened to her, and it broke her heart that the real Olivia couldn't be there to see it. Esther and Latham snuck out to have lunch, but on their way back to the store, they made the mistake of using the main entrance and unwittingly found themselves in the heart of a media storm. Latham, are you here for the Unique perfume launch? Are you selecting a scent for your girlfriend? Latham, we've heard whispers about the impending wedding. Care to comment? Latham, is this enchanting woman beside you your girlfriend? Latham smirked playfully and rubbed his forehead. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the mastermind behind Unique Perfumes. Do you really think I need to select a scent for her? The news hit the reporters like a lightning bolt. You're Sabrina, the master perfume at Unique? A swarm of microphones buzzed towards her. We heard rumors that Unique is expecting to roll out stores worldwide and disrupt the entire industry in a matter of months. Is that correct? Esther's response was crisp and confident. Right now, I'm just excited to be opening our very first store here in New York. Her face was accentuated by sleek black glasses and a trendy jumpsuit. And true to our brand, we'll go where the people take us, not the other way around. Sabrina, could you clarify the nature of your relationship with Latham? Are you two dating? A cryptic smile danced on Esther's lips. What do you suppose? After a beat, she winked and waved them off. Latham is a cherished friend. We've known each other for 7 years, so of course we share some intimacy. Are you suggesting that you and Latham are intimate with each other? I don't know. Am I suggesting that? Deflecting their questions with the poise of a seasoned diplomat, she steered the conversation elsewhere by pointing to a reporter near the back of the throng. Excuse me, miss. Aren't you wearing Mirage? That was our first breakthrough fragrance last spring. The reporter blinked in surprise, her face morphing into an expression of pure astonishment. How could you possibly have smelled that from there? Your nose is incredible. Esther's eyes sparkled mischievously. Just remember, perfumes can intoxicate. Be careful who you use them on. As everyone laughed, she paused to gather her thoughts, and her tone became more serious. I must confess, I wasn't born with this extraordinary sense of smell. A few years back, I became severely ill. My sight was taken for over a year, and I teetered on the brink of death. When I finally recovered, I found that my olfactory senses were amplified. I guess it's like the old saying goes. When God closes a door, he opens a window. Her mouth turned up into a grin. And thank God for that, because not all of you smell as good as my friend in the back. The reporters all roared with laughter again, and off to the side, Latham watched in awe as Esther memorized them with her charisma. He suddenly felt disoriented. He knew she wasn't Olivia, and that, despite their identical faces, their spirits were worlds apart. Yet in all of his earliest memories of his late wife, she radiated a similar confidence and beauty, at least until financial burdens had stripped her bare. A pang of sorrow gripped his heart, and he realized he couldn't bear to watch her a moment longer. Slipping on his sunglasses, he made a silent departure. A few hours later, a cab pulled up to the store and Nancy stepped out. She beamed with pride at Esther's achievement and headed in to greet her. Her business attire only seemed to accentuate her youthful charm, and she drew the eyes of jealous women as she passed. She finally spotted Esther and started toward her when a jarring voice rang out. "Isn't that Maria?" Nancy rolled her eyes, knowing exactly who had called her name. She turned around as Chloe approached, and her sister Zoe right behind her. Zoe smirked, her voice dripping with disdain. "Well, well, if it isn't the woman Steve tossed aside. The most basic perfume here costs $1,000. Do you think you can handle that kind of price tag?" Chloe cut in. "Zoe, be nice. Window shopping isn't a crime." Nancy laughed at herself. She had to give it to Chloe. She was a master of underhanded digs. Zoe kept prodding. "Shouldn't you be saving your pennies for Daddy's court battle? Sounds like it's not going well." Chloe took Nancy's shoulder. "Don't listen to her. She likes to gossip." But Zoe wouldn't stop. "I can see the headlines now. One's a prominent Miller family found living on the streets. On the plus side, sources say their tent smells great." Her taunts had finally turned the room's attention toward Nancy. Esther's eyes narrowed, ready to swoop in, but a subtle gesture from Nancy held her back. Nancy calmly faced Zoe. "Are you finished?" Zoe's sneer was chilling. "Admit it. Steve got bored of you and kicked you to the curb. Did you get that scar on your head from when the door hit you on the way out?" Suddenly, a masculine voice shattered the silence. "Who said I kicked her to the curb?" It was Steve, standing imperiously at the store entrance. His tailor suit accentuated his darkly handsome features, and his aura remained as icy as ever, an unmelting glacier. Suddenly, a frosty grin crossed his impassive face. Chloe shook off Zoe to approach Steve, her voice full of forced cheeriness. "Steve, what a surprise seeing you here. Planning on buying something for someone special?" To Chloe's shock, he brushed her off and continued towards Zoe. "The scar on her forehead is a souvenir from a business trip to Los Angeles, and she'll continue to be a valued employee of the Davis Group, regardless of her father. Now answer my question. Who said I broke up with her?" Nancy's jaw dropped at Steve's sudden intervention. This was the most he had ever spoken in her presence, and she couldn't believe it was in her defense. Meanwhile, Zoe shrank under Steve's frosty glare. I heard whispers that you two had split, and she's just an intern. How can she afford such overpriced? Esther, silent till now, moved forward, her gaze sweeping over the store's patrons. "Does everyone else here find my perfumes overpriced?" Customers immediately began shouting back. "Heck no! It's the mass-produced ones that are overpriced. You're an artist, Sabrina. We're just lucky we get to wear your work." Esther offered a gracious smile before her gaze found Nancy. "Then you'll be happy to know that Maria has agreed to be my global brand ambassador. Her salary is $1 million per year, and naturally, she gets all the free perfume she wants." She wrapped an affectionate arm around Nancy and cast a triumphant look at Zoe. "I wonder, miss, does that answer your question?" Zoe's face was frozen in a mask of incredulity. Even Chloe was visibly taken aback, her practiced pageant smile having twisted up with awkwardness. Suddenly, a reporter shouted, "How can she be your brand ambassador? She looks like she's in high school." Esther playfully nestled her head against Nancy's. "Boy, are you going to feel stupid when the world sees what I see. Maria is the total embodiment of what we do here at Unique. Not only is she beautiful, She works full-time as an AI researcher for the biggest firm in the city and is #1 in her class at NYU. Beauty and brains. What's more unique than that? As Esther's words reverberated through the room, the critical gazes directed at Nancy transformed into adoration. Suddenly, another reporter spoke up, having caught something that Esther said. "Wait a minute. If she works for the Davis Group and your name is Steve, that must make you Steve Davis." A collective gasp filled the room, and the inevitable follow-up question came soon after. "You just said you didn't dump this young lady. Does that mean you two are together?" Suddenly, the narrative veered into a tantalizing realm of gossip. Nancy turned to face Steve and saw his lips press into a tight smile. After his usual outburst in her defense, she had no clue how he would respond. And what she did know was that if Jonathan saw a picture of the two of them, no less heard any rumors, it could be extremely bad for her. Fearing the crowd might incite his wrath, she stepped forward and skillfully redirected the conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid such personal matters are not up for public dissection today. Let's remember that we are here for Unique." The crowd murmured in disappointment, but the spotlight gradually slid off Steve, and the room seemed to return to normal. Chloe, struggling to maintain her composure, approached Steve again. "I'm so sorry for what Zoe said. I'm not bringing her out again with me until she can learn not to be so naive and judgmental." Steve responded with a barely audible grunt, and Chloe could tell her presence was unwanted. With flushed cheeks, she grabbed her sister by the arm and made her way quickly from the store. Once Chloe was gone, Esther turned to Steve, and a radiant smile lit up her face. "Steve, we finally meet. Maria has told me so much about you." Steve smiled wryly. "I wish I could say the same, but that's Maria, isn't it? Ever the closed book." Suddenly, he shifted his attention to Nancy. His gaze made her breath catch in her throat. An impermanent grin played across his face, and he looked like a hunter about to spring a trap on his prey. "Speaking of which, as my valued employee, care to explain why you're out here making a scene instead of back at work earning your generous paycheck?" Nancy stammered, and her face flushed. Steve had never seized the upper hand like this with her before. Beneath her embarrassment and anger, she couldn't deny that she felt a twinge of attraction to the bold, powerful version of Steve that was looming over her. Nancy felt trapped under Steve's piercing gaze. Of all the times she could have been caught skipping work, why did it have to be today? And why did it have to be by him? Adding fuel to the fire, Esther had just triumphantly announced that Nancy was going to be the face of her global campaign. Nancy finally spoke in a meek whisper. "Sorry, I just wanted to congratulate my friend on her big day." To Nancy's surprise, Steve's face softened, and he spoke gently. "I'm not here to punish you, Maria. What are you so afraid of?" A wave of relief washed over Nancy and Esther. From the sidelines, Esther chimed in. "Steve, you've been a guardian angel for my dear Maria today, and as a token of my gratitude, I'll create a signature cologne just for you." Nancy raised a curious eyebrow. "Do you wear cologne?" Steve glanced at Nancy, and she sensed a spark of annoyance. It occurred to her just how little she knew about the man she pretended to date for 6 months. He turned to Esther. "Thank you so much. I'd prefer something woody and understated." Esther nodded and immediately began her alchemy. As she worked, a sea of cell phones rose and recorded her every move. Unlike the customers at the self-service machines, who juggled 4 fragrances at most, Esther was adeptly blending over a dozen. Unaware of the sensation she was causing, Esther completed the initial adjustments and presented Steve with a test strip. "Care to indulge your senses in your custom scent?" As Steve inhaled the fragrance, Nancy watched his expression evolve from curiosity to stunned delight. "It's extraordinary, Esther. You really are a magician." Esther beamed at his approval. "I'll note the formula and have Maria send it over another day." With that, Steve turned back to Nancy. "Now then, do you plan on returning to work?" Nancy nodded shyly. "Yeah, I should probably get back." As Steve led Nancy out, Esther called to her with a cheeky grin. "See you tonight, global brand ambassador." The moment Steve and Nancy settled into the car, Nancy's phone buzzed with a new message from Esther. "Spill it. What's brewing between you and Steve? Uncle and nephew at the same time? You're playing in the big leagues now." Nancy laughed despite herself, and Steve glanced over as she typed her response. "It's a whole mess. I'll tell you the full story later. But let's be clear. There's nothing between me and Steve." The response from Esther was almost immediate. "Oh, really?" Because his smoldering gaze and your blushing cheeks told a different story. "If it were me, I'd just keep both of them. The uncle's got the power, and the nephew's as sweet as a puppy. A delight combo, if you ask me." Less than a foot away in the driver's seat, Steve couldn't help but steal glances at Maria as she texted. He found himself captivated by the lilting sound of her laughter and the playful spark that danced in her eyes. It was a genuine, unguarded moment of joy, and it left him momentarily dazed. Despite everything that had happened between them, he suddenly found himself putting aside his preconceived notions of her for the first time. Seeing her in this new light, her beauty and charm radiated like a beacon. She was a stunning blend of intelligence, competence, and rationality, sprinkled with a wit and youthful exuberance that made her irresistible. He chided himself for falling for a woman that had broken up with him barely a week earlier, but he was certain that had happened because she didn't know the real him. He was determined to change that. History be damned. Before long, they arrived back at the Davis Group headquarters, and Steve maneuvered the car into the underground parking lot. Nancy was still engrossed in her chat with Esther and hadn't noticed they had come to a stop until Steve leaned over. "All right, I have to know what's so funny." Caught off guard by his sudden closeness, Nancy quickly tucked her phone away. "It's an AB conversation." Steve looked flummoxed. "So why don't you see your way out of it?" "That's the dumbest joke I've ever heard." Her eyes widened in feigned shock. "How dare you impugn my 8-year-old Maria's favorite joke?" She shoved in playfully, but he caught her hands. "Skipping work and now attacking a superior? Imagine what HR will say when they hear this." Steve laughed, and Nancy realized this was the first moment she had ever felt truly at ease around him. She tried to yank her arms from Steve's grasp, and though he held on tight, it caught him off guard and pulled his body towards hers. They both laughed as Nancy fought to free her arms, until they suddenly locked eyes from only a few inches apart. If Nancy hadn't been so convinced of his antipathy towards her, she might have thought he was flirting. Then, with a gentle smile, he let her go. No sooner had he freed her hands than an intense light flooded the car. Someone had pulled up right behind them, and their high light beams pierced through the darkness, leaving Nancy and Steve momentarily blinded. An abrasive screech echoed through the garage, and the car backed up to pull in alongside them. As Nancy's vision adjusted, Steve looked in the side mirror, and his voice was suddenly icy again. "I know that car. It's Jonathan." At the sound of Jonathan's name, Nancy's heart pounded like a drum, and her mind raced a mile a minute. She looked around for a place to hide, but deep down, she already knew it was too late. She was going to have to face him. Steve unbuckled his seatbelt, kicked open the car door, and strode out. "Well, that's one way to say hello." His voice echoed in the vast space. Emerging from his own car, Jonathan threw a sharp glance at Steve before his icy gaze landed on Nancy, standing at the passenger door. His lips tightened into a thin line, and his eyes glinted coldly under the fluorescent lights. A knot of dread twisted in Nancy's stomach as Jonathan approached them. "Off to work, are we?" Steve chimed in, his voice somewhat defensive. "We were just out handling some business." Nancy glanced between the two of them and felt certain that Jonathan would reveal their secret if she didn't stop him. In the span of 2 rapid heartbeats, she concocted a plan. Her voice wavered as she cut in. "Jonathan, I'm sorry. I left work and Steve caught me, so he offered to bring me back. Jonathan's frosty gaze turned to Steve. Is that so? Steve, still visibly confused by Jonathan's intensity, nodded. Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. Nancy felt a surge of relief as Steve corroborated her story. Jonathan, however, wasn't appeased. He fixed Steve with a glare, his tone unyielding. You have to enforce discipline, nephew. If people think she's getting special attention because of your relationship with her, they'll lose trust in you as a leader. Uncle, she's just an intern. Jonathan's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. Nancy could tell that he hated seeing Steve stand up for her. Is she not also your girlfriend? Steve's eyes flickered with understanding, and his expression became troubled. Jonathan paused dramatically before dropping another bomb. If you two weren't together, we wouldn't have to be so severe with her. Steve glanced at Nancy, but she was powerless to help. Jonathan had once told her he would make Steve disappear if he had to, and for the first time, Nancy actually believed him. Steve took a deep breath and turned back to Jonathan. It's true. Maria and I broke up. She's an intern here and nothing more. A faint smirk appeared on Jonathan's lips as he turned to Nancy. Did you hear that? When she met Jonathan's gaze, she suddenly understood that he had crafted this entire tableau to force Steve into publicly declaring their breakup. This way, when the time came to reveal his own relationship with her, he wouldn't face any backlash for poaching his nephew's girlfriend. It would seem as if Steve had willingly released her, and Jonathan would be blameless. But even though she saw right through his game, she was still left with no choice but to play along, and nodded silently. Jonathan turned to Steve again, his voice softening, almost conciliatory. Well then, given the circumstances, I agree there's no need to make an example out of her. We'll treat her like we would treat any intern. His gaze shifted back to Nancy, his command irrefutable. Follow me upstairs for some paperwork in HR. As for this month's paycheck, consider it forfeited. With that, he strode away, leaving Nancy with no option but to trail after him. As the elevator doors closed, Nancy watched as Jonathan punched in 2 floor numbers, 18 for HR and the top floor for his office. Her mind spun, trying to decipher his intentions. Was he really planning to hold her paycheck for the month? How far was he willing to take this? As the elevator started upward, Nancy suddenly found herself pinned between the cold elevator wall and Jonathan's body. His intoxicating scent washed over her, and his voice dropped to a dangerous, husky whisper. Maria, you've managed to provoke me yet again. How do you propose to make it up to me? Caught in the trap of his arms, Nancy could only look up into his dark eyes. After a moment, she found her voice. I didn't provoke you. You heard it yourself. I went to Times Square to congratulate Esther on her grand opening, and Steve ran into me on my way out. Then came the question she was afraid of. Back in the parking lot, would he have kissed you if I hadn't made my appearance? Nancy shouted a laugh. Steve? He has no interest in me. He never had. You know that better than anyone. Besides, even if he did get horrible amnesia, forgot he hated me, and tried to kiss me, I would reject him. Something in her response seemed to mollify Jonathan. He eased up slightly, cradling her chin and tracing her lips with his thumb. His voice dropped to a low, seductive murmur. Do you recall what I said in the coffee shop? His tone rose slightly at the end, hinting at a veiled threat. You know I would never hurt you, but that doesn't apply to everyone else. Despite her simmering anger, Nancy couldn't think of a way out other than to acquiesce. He held all the power in these halls, and if she ever angered him enough to get herself fired, it would destroy all of her carefully laid plans. Further, if he went public with everything that had conspired between them, the only person whose reputation would suffer was hers. With no choice but to bite back her rage, she nodded in understanding. Good. Jonathan's fingers lingered on her lips, his own lips tantalizingly close, yet not quite touching. His breath intermingled with hers, and a strange warmth spread through her body, all her senses tingling with the unfulfilled promise of a kiss. Just then, the elevator dinged, signaling their arrival on the 18th floor. Nancy made a swift attempt to push Jonathan away, but he held her tightly, towering over her, his lips still inches away from hers. She was about to protest when she suddenly sensed a shift outside the elevator. She glanced over, and a young HR employee stared at them, with his jaw on the floor. Jonathan's attention snapped over him like a predator eyeing prey, and the young man suddenly looked petrified. He knew he had seen something he wasn't supposed to. His voice trembled as he tried to hide his shaking hands. "Mr. Davis, hello. I was just going." He turned to leave, but Jonathan's booming voice stopped him in his tracks. "Hold it right there." Nancy stood frigid, her hand frozen on Jonathan's chest. The employee who'd stumbled upon this spectacle at the elevator was on the brink of tears, terrified of the unfolding drama. Before she could even process her thoughts, Jonathan had her cocooned in his arms. His hand gently guided her face and pressed it against his chest. His icy glare pierced the employee, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "What did you see?" The employee spluttered into a flood of panicked tears. "Mr. Davis, I promise, I didn't see a thing. I'm nearsighted, and I'm not wearing my glasses, and you block the view. I only saw you alone in an elevator, or maybe I didn't even see that." "I suggest you stick to that story." Jonathan held his stare as the elevator doors closed with an echoing thud. As the elevator continued upward, Nancy pulled away from Jonathan and glared at him. "You're really docking my pay, aren't you?" "I'll let Jack inform HR and bring the papers over. In the meantime, let's have a little chat in my office." Jonathan's nonchalance made Nancy's blood boil. She couldn't believe he was using his power to bully her like this, and all because she was in the same car as Steve. When the elevator finally opened on the top floor, she followed him into his office with her lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. Once inside, Jonathan dialed Jack on the office phone and instructed him to speak with HR. After hanging up, he retrieved a box from the lounge. "I'm glad I ran into you today, Maria, because I spotted a necklace in a boutique yesterday, and it's as if it was specially made for you." He attempted to drape it around Nancy's neck, but she held him off, scoffing. "You have to be kidding me." "Of course not. I picked it out just for you. That can't be a surprise." "I'm talking about you trying to gift me right after you bullied me and docked my pay. If you think treating me like that will make me want to be your girlfriend, then you know even less about me than I imagined." "Maria, this necklace is worth a fortune, way more than a month's salary." Jonathan leaned in to kiss her. "What if I make it a cash gift instead?" Nancy squirmed free, glaring at him with disgust. "I don't need your charity. If you're going to treat me just like another ant under your heel, then that's what you can expect in return." With that, she marched to the door, yanked it open, and stormed out. As she charged to the elevator, Steve stepped out and clocked her rageful expression. "Maria, what's wrong?" "Oh, good. It's my knight in shining armor." Nancy brushed past him and punched her floor on the elevator. As Steve watched Maria storm off, he couldn't help feeling sorry for her. Summoning his courage, he turned and walked into Jonathan's office. "Uncle, I think a month's salary deduction is too harsh. She made one dumb decision." Jonathan leaned back and slowly lifted his gaze from the documents on his desk, a disconcerting smirk playing on his lips. "Steve, Maria just told me she dumped you, yet here you are defending her. Was the breakup not mutual? Are you secretly in love with her?" Steve's breath hitched, tangled in a knot of denial and acceptance. His mind screamed no, yet his heart pounded yes. The memory of the electrifying tension in the car, his burning desire to pull her close, the secret yearnings to make their faux relationship real. It all pointed to one terrifying truth. He was in love with her. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt, leaving him shaken, yet a strange sweetness blossomed within him. It was an emotion he'd never felt before, but he knew he couldn't show Jonathan his true feelings without risking further reprisal from her. He was so engrossed in his turmoil that he almost missed Jonathan's sudden shift in conversation. "Steve," Jonathan began, cutting through his daze. "I've been grappling with the decision for the Mexico project that's slated to break ground on Monday. I need a strong ally to oversee it, someone I can trust implicitly to keep it on schedule and under budget. You're the only person who fits the bill." Steve narrowed his eyes. "Surely you have someone better suited to that environment. I don't even speak Spanish." Jonathan's tone turned somber as he completely ignored Steve's protest. "The initial phase will be grueling. You'll need to live there for half a year, at least. But of course you can always fly back if you're not too swamped. No pun intended. Did I mention the first phase is filling in a swamp?" Jonathan handed him a document. "Anyway, get familiar with it and start assembling a team and a budget estimate. From now on, you're in charge." Taking the document, Steve glanced it over. "I don't see what I can add to this. I really think my skills are better put to use here in New York." Jonathan offered a cryptic smile. "Nonsense. You're just not giving yourself enough credit. If you have any questions, feel free to call Jack. He'll help you with everything you might need." Steve's expression hardened, and he offered a curt nod before exiting. Leaving Jonathan's office with the documents, an unsettling feeling nagged at him. Was Jonathan trying to get him out of New York? Did it have something to do with Maria? The following day, Nancy arrived at the studio leased by Unique to do her first photo shoot as the face of the brand. As the wardrobe designer laid a diamond necklace across her collarbones, a flicker of the day before crossed her mind. She couldn't believe Jonathan thought his volatile jealousy could be paved over with a shiny gift. She refused to keep playing his game of cat and mouse if he was going to keep changing the rules. So she took her phone out and promptly blocked him on all of her social media. When she finally emerged from the dressing room, Nancy was breathtaking. Her figure, accentuated by the white gown, was the epitome of elegance and grace, and her beauty was ethereal from every conceivable angle. Esther turned to Brock, whose gaze was fixed on Nancy. "Brock, I've gone ahead and made Maria the face of Unique. I trust you have no objections?" Brock's eyes stayed glued to Nancy, and an approving smile graced his lips. "Absolutely not. Unique is my subsidiary only in name. As we agree, it's your company to run." He paused deliberately, letting the silence linger. "And besides, your eye for talent is incredible. I think I'd like to get more familiar with our new spokesperson." Esther smiled with playful defiance. "She's off the market. Don't bother." Brock winked. "When you're as rich as me, everything is on the market." Under the glaring spotlight, Nancy was a spectacle, radiating an irresistible charm for the camera. She had never modeled before, but the photographer encouraged her to do whatever felt natural, and after all, that was the point of the brand's identity. Meanwhile, Esther captured a short video on her phone and uploaded it to Instagram with a tantalizing caption. "The full promo video will take a bit, but here's a little teaser to tide you over." As expected, the comment section exploded instantly. "OMG, opening Insta nearly gave me a heart attack. She's so hot, it's dangerous. Sabrina, where in the universe did you find a literal goddess? I need to sit down. I'm 28, 6 feet tall, 165 pounds, and rake in over $1 million a year. I love sports, globetrotting, and photography. Maria, will you be my wife?" As the post skyrocketed in popularity, a particular comment declaring love for Nancy received a like from a high-profile user, the enigmatic owner of Unique's parent company, also known as Brock. Internet sleuths quickly unearthed every shred of information about him that had surfaced online. Surprisingly young, he was a billionaire in his 30s who ran a massive tech and shipping conglomerate with a large international footprint. Moreover, Leaked posts from his private social media seemed to indicate he was an eligible bachelor with a clean past. This specific revelation sent the internet into a tailspin of excitement and conjecture. Soon enough, a single grainy photograph of Brock surfaced. Its low resolution shrouded much of his identity in mystery, but even through the pixelized haze, one could glimpse an unmistakable allure. A silhouette hinting at a striking figure, and distinct features that suggested an uncommonly handsome face. Within minutes, the rumors filled the comment thread on Esther's post. Did a billionaire just propose to her with a like? Come on, give the normal guys a chance before you snatch her away. Esther's lips curled into a triumphant smirk as she perused the cascading comments. The response had already surpassed her wildest expectations, and she was buoyed by the certainty that it had taken on new life thanks to Brock. Nonetheless, she could sense that his infatuation with Nancy might lead to trouble. She didn't know Jonathan well, but if he was as ruthless as Nancy claimed, then the last thing Esther wanted was for her friend to wind up as some kind of trophy in a competition between Jonathan and Brock. Halfway across the continent in Houston, Stark wandered into the office break room at the Franklin Group headquarters. He always got his coffee from the same station his employees used, in order to project an image as a man of the people. As he stepped into the room, a chorus of warm smiles and friendly greetings met him. "Morning, boss. Looking good, Mr. Green." With a carefully crafted smile and a relaxed pose, he leaned against the wall and waved to his team. "What's the word around the office today? Did Jerry finally decide to quit fantasy football before he loses his house?" Everyone laughed, and an eager female jumped in with the latest buzz. "We were just talking about the spokeswoman for this new perfume brand, Unique. Apparently she's just a normal woman, but she's literally the most beautiful person we've ever seen." She thrust her phone into Stark's hands, and his eyes honed in on the video. At first, it just appeared to be a teaser for an upcoming commercial. But as the video looped a second time, and the model looked right at the camera, recognition hit him like a freight train. It was her. It was Maria. He hadn't seen her since that dramatic night in Chicago, and now here she was, shimmering like a goddess under the studio lights. A familiar hunger welled up within him. "She is undeniably a beauty." His voice was smooth as silk, and his eyes never left the screen. A male colleague suddenly interjected. "Imagine if we could snag her to endorse the Phoenix. They'd sell like hotcakes." The woman sitting next to him smacked him on the arm. "What are you talking about? Amelia's not beautiful enough for you now? She's a world-famous model. That's exactly the kind of prestige we need." "We don't need prestige when you look like Maria." Stark quickly returned to his desk, opened his phone, and found Maria's video for himself. He watched it a few times in a trance before downloading it. He then pulled up Amelia's most recent promo video, but couldn't make it past the first few seconds without sneering in disgust. He leaned back in his chair, and a conniving grin spread across his face. At the end of another demanding day, Jonathan's phone lit up with a reminder that he was supposed to meet Xavier, Latham, and Hannah for drinks at the Diamond Club. Xavier had been away for months working on a project for Jonathan, and had been so buried in work, he couldn't even make it home for Olivia's funeral. Jonathan soon arrived at the club, and as he entered the elevator to his private room, he ran into Hannah. She peered past him and smiled coyly. "I take it you came alone this time?" Jonathan bounced his eyebrows, and an ironic smile danced across his lips, a silent admission of his defeat. Reminded of Maria, he whipped out his phone and dashed off a text, his fingers dancing with the kind of desperation that only a scorned man knows. Nancy had blocked him on every social media app and had left all of his texts on read. He hated to admit it, but her silence had pierced his defenses. With a flurry of keystrokes, he sent out one more lifeline. "Maria, please don't freeze me out. I'm talking to HR and arranging a bonus that's triple the amount I deducted from your salary." He paused, a momentary lapse in his frenzied typing before he continued. "I shouldn't have lashed out at you like I did. I know I need to learn to control my jealousy. Just please, don't ghost me." His plea, opened and unguarded, rippled across the screen. If he had looked up right then, he would have seen Hannah glance over, her eyes going wide with unspoken understanding. When the elevator doors slid open, Jonathan's gaze landed on Xavier. His voice held a rare note of whimsy. "So, the prodigal son finally returns. You know you missed a thing or two while you were gone." Latham grinned darkly. "Really? I can't think of anything memorable." Xavier put his arm around Latham. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." "I'm just glad you're back, buddy." Hannah chimed in. "Only because you're back means Latham isn't the most boring man in New York anymore." Latham's face spread into an easy grin, and he poured himself a hearty glass of wine. Hannah followed suit, her glass chiming against his. "Here's to friends," she toasted, and they both drank deeply. After everyone exchanged hugs, Jonathan pulled Xavier to the side to discuss the project he'd just completed. Latham soon sauntered over, phone in hand. He was already starting to look drunk, and it made him even bolder than normal. "Hey, Jonathan. Looks like your little lady is taking offers. Aren't you going to place a bid?" The screen blazed with the scandal of the day. The powerful owner of the hottest new fashion brand, Unique Fragrances, suggests he wants to marry the face of his company, Maria Miller. When will the biggest wedding of the season finally be set? Jonathan's jaw clenched as he skimmed through the comments, his eyes laid on the one that Brock had liked, then the one that had started it all. "I'm 28 years old, 6 feet tall, weigh 165 pounds, and rake in over $1 million a year." Jonathan's grip on the phone grew tight, that a small crack snaked across its screen. The audacity of the comments that followed, varying in age, height, weight, annual income, and hobbies, made Jonathan's blood boil. The men were as young as 15 and as old as 60, and most earned less than a year than Jonathan did in an hour. But he reserved most of his ire for Brock. Jonathan knew exactly what he was trying to do. His fingers flew over the screen as he typed out a response from his anonymous account. "I'm 30 years old, 6'2", weigh 170 pounds, and command an annual salary of over $10 billion. My only hobby, indulging Maria, because she is mine and mine alone." Given Esther's social media page was a hot topic, his comment was spotted in no time. His phone began buzzing relentlessly as a swarm of replies stormed in. The first jab came real quick. "Dude, are you hallucinating? $10 billion a year? What did you do? Rob Fort Knox?" The onslaught continued. "Wow, it's not every day you meet the most delusional man on the internet." "Hey, your mom's calling. She says it's time to get off Instagram and go downstairs for dinner." "If you're so rich, then why don't you show us your face? Oh yeah, 'cause you're fake." After reading all the replies, Jonathan felt a surge of frustration so potent he wanted to hurl his phone against the wall. His fingers drummed a staccato rhythm, dialing Jack. "Jack, exterminate those accounts. I don't care who they belong to." Xavier, ever the mediator, cast him a questioning glance. "Earth to Jonathan. What's wrong? Isn't this supposed to be a party?" Jonathan exhaled, tamping down his frustration. "You're right. Enough business. Let's drink." Their discussion ebbed and flowed, and as Latham got increasingly drunk, he became more and more unruly. When he finally dropped a full decanter of wine and cut his hand trying to clean it up, Jonathan sprang out of his seat. He approached Latham and saw his eyes were glazed over with drunkenness. Latham held up his sloppy bandaged hand and slurred, "Just a flesh wound. The party continues." He snatched a bottle of whiskey and held it to his mouth, but Jonathan intercepted the bottle, his voice stern. "I think you've had enough, Lath. Too many more flesh wounds, and you're going to wind up dead in a gutter." His gaze then flicked to Hannah, who was slumped across the table, still clutching a glass of wine. She hadn't even budged when Latham shattered the decanter. "Hannah?" Jonathan's call echoed through the hushed room. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were glassy with tears, and her voice was a fragile whisper. "Jonathan, I need to get out of here. I need to go home." Sensing the undercurrent of her distress, Jonathan pressed gently. "What happened? Who upset you?" Hannah let out a sigh so deep it seemed to come from her very soul. "Scott and I broke up this morning." "Scott? I didn't even realize you had a boyfriend. What happened?" Hannah shook her head, dismissing the question. "It doesn't matter." Jonathan looked between his two wasted friends and rolled his eyes. "Xavier, can you help her up? These two are toast." Xavier steadied Hannah as she struggled to her feet, and they followed Jonathan and Latham into the hall. As they made their way to the elevator, a chorus of laughter echoed from the other end of the corridor, coming toward them. Nancy had initially been nervous when Brock suggested celebrating Unique's triumphant debut at the Diamond Club, but as they were all getting ready to leave, she breathed a sigh of relief. She hadn't seen any signs of Jonathan all night. They made their way to the elevator, still laughing and cheering, when Nancy froze. Her gaze locked on Jonathan as he held the thumb up and waited for the elevator. Of course he was there. Jonathan narrowed his eyes, and she noticed his gaze dance between her and Brock. He leaned the thumb against the wall and strode toward them, his face an enigmatic canvas. As she took a deep breath and prepared for whatever was coming, she noticed Esther's grip on her hand tighten. "Esther, what's wrong?" Her voice quivered with concern. Esther didn't respond, but Nancy followed her gaze and saw her eyes were riveted on Xavier. She noticed Xavier's eyes linger on Esther momentarily as well, before purposefully darting away. "Hey, you okay?" Esther suddenly shook it off. "I'm fine. Sorry." She glanced at Jonathan and murmured into Nancy's ear, her voice laced with mischief. "I detect the bitter scent of jealousy. Why is it that we seem to cross paths with the same people every time we leave the house?" Nancy's expression hardened. "Something tells me it's not an accident." Jonathan finally stepped up to Nancy like a predator closing in on his prey. He didn't even look at Brock. "Finished with your party, Maria?" He took his hand in hers like it was perfectly normal. "Perfect timing. Let's get out of here." Without waiting for a response, he pulled Nancy toward the elevator. Just then, Latham swerved toward Esther, draping his arm over her shoulder with a jolt. His eyes bulged in surprise. "Olivia, where have you been?" A crushing silence descended on the hallway, each second ticking by like a time bomb. Esther sighed and pushed against Latham's chest, peeling him off of her. "Latham, the booze is playing tricks on you. I'm not who you think I am." The surprise in Latham's eyes waned, replaced by a foggy realization. "Right, Olivia's gone. She left me all alone in this godforsaken world." His voice faded into a whisper, and he trudged back to the elevator. As he stumbled over the carpet and teetered on the edge of a fall, Esther lunged forward to steady him, but someone else was faster. Xavier swooped in, his swift movement causing a collision with Esther. Her heels betray her, and she instinctively clutched Xavier's arm for balance. When she regained her footing, she found herself face to face with him. "My apologies," he said coldly. Esther quickly withdrew her hand and plastered a practiced smile on her face. "No harm done. We're all still standing." The elevator finally arrived, and Jonathan steered Nancy inside, his finger punching the button for the first floor. Nancy attempted to break free, but he tightened his grip, allowing no room for resistance. She considered making a scene, but could only imagine that making things worse in the long run. The last thing she needed was an open battle between her two bosses. Esther leaned over to Nancy. "Hey now, didn't you come here with me? How come you're holding this schmuck's hand now?" Nancy stifled a laugh, and Jonathan stared daggers at Esther. She met it with a defiant shrug and a puckish gleam in her eyes. Hannah, who had been eerily silent since entering the elevator, suddenly clutched her mouth. It was clear she was about to be sick, and Austin blurted out a laugh. "What's wrong, beautiful? You got a bun in the oven?" Hannah shot him a glacial look, and Brock intervened. "Forgive him. He's an idiot when he drinks." Then he turned to Austin. "Apologize." Austin kicked at the floor like a reprimanded child and muttered, "Sorry." As soon as the elevator doors slid open, Hannah dashed out. Jonathan followed suit, still dragging Nancy behind him, and followed Hannah outside to the curb. "Come with Maria and I. We'll make sure you get home safely." Regaining some color in the fresh air, Hannah brushed him off. "Don't worry, Jonathan. I've got a ride." Jonathan furrowed his eyebrows. "From who? Everyone you know is here." "A friend from high school. Just leave me here. I'll be fine." Jonathan started to protest, but Hannah looked determined to go her own way. His car quickly pulled up, and he opened the door, still holding Nancy's hand. "Get in." "You know you're abducting me right now, right?" "Don't be so dramatic." "Then don't be such an ass." Jonathan just stared at her impassively. Eventually, she sighed and yanked her hand out of his grasp. With a dramatic eye roll, she climbed into the back seat. Jonathan joined Nancy in the car and shut the door behind him. From the front seat, Jack came over the intercom. "Where to, boss?" "Tavern on the Green," came Jonathan's curt reply. As the car pulled away, Nancy tried to resist Jonathan's embrace, but he gently reeled her back in. "Relax, Maria. I know you never eat in front of crowds like that. There's a tavern in Central Park with incredible food. You'll love it." To Nancy's surprise, they soon found themselves in a tranquil oasis nestled within the city's bustling heart. The elegant lodge was only a short walk from Columbus Avenue, but amidst the verdant greenery, it felt like a hidden sanctuary she never knew existed. When they stepped into the intimate confines of the restaurant, Jonathan summoned the waiter with an air of command, demanding a selection of all their best dishes. As the waiter made his exit, a palpable tension hung over their table, like an unspoken secret. Nancy's mind was a tempest, her thoughts churning like a stormy sea. Her confusion was as tangible as the anger that still simmered beneath her surface, and she couldn't fathom why she'd agreed to this midnight rendezvous. But when she finally allowed their eyes to meet, Jonathan made his move and slid onto her side of the booth, wrapping his arms around her. He whispered in her ear, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Let go of your anger." She wanted to scream, but remained silent and still. Unfazed, Jonathan tried another tact. "You've got a global endorsement now, Maria. Are you really going to hold a grudge over a single month's salary?" Caught off guard, she shot back. "It's not about money." The words slipped out in a petulant tone, making her sound like a sullen child. She blushed, and her cheeks burned with a mix of embarrassment and annoyance. A mischievous glint sparkled in Jonathan's eyes. Instead of calling her out, he used her moment of vulnerability to smoothly change the subject. "Did you have a chance to see the message I sent you earlier?" "I haven't looked at my phone all day. I heard I was blowing up after the Unique shoot and didn't want to deal with it. Thanks a lot, Esther." She smiled wryly. Jonathan picked up her phone, guided her fingers to unlock it, and pulled up his message. She laughed as she read it. "You're seriously offering me a bonus?" He nodded, and a slow smile played on his lips. "I meant it when I said I wanted to make it up to you. You're an excellent employee, and you deserve to have your work recognized by the company. I'm not always going to get everything right on the first try, but I will always make it up to you when I don't. So, are we good now?" Nancy narrowed her eyes, recognizing his calculated charm, but she also saw the opportunity to win more resources for her team. She remembered how Jonathan had practically bribed Peter into joining the Davis group. If he wanted to keep her on his good side, maybe she could get him to do the same for the rest of them. She allowed a smug smile to play on her lips, reveling in the anticipation. Jonathan caught her impish grin, and his lips curled in response. "So, we have a deal?" She remained silent. After a moment of contemplation, Jonathan retrieved his phone. "Maria, I took some serious flack for you today." She looked at him incredulously. "Who would have the nerve to reprimand you? Don't they know you could destroy their world?" Jonathan flicked open his anonymous Instagram account. "See for yourself." Her eyes widened as she read the scathing replies to his comment. Their boldness was amusing, though, and she was soon laughing despite herself. Suddenly feeling her own burst of boldness, she pulled out her phone, found Jonathan's conversational post, and replied, "So, a man with an annual income of $1 billion is haggling with his smartest intern over a few $1,000s?" The moment she posted it, she froze. She was startled by her own impulsiveness. If Jonathan responded poorly, it could start the cycle of jealousy all over again. To her relief, Jonathan saw her retort and let out a triumphant laugh. "This Maria girl is right. I'm just short a few $1,000s this month." Nancy shook her head. "Do all your employees know you're this capricious?" His demeanor shifted from playful to grave. "They don't, because I only show this side of myself to you." They locked eyes, and her heart suddenly pounded in her chest. No matter what happened between them, he possessed a unique hold on her, a unique ability to make all her senses go haywire, with nothing but a glance. His dark eyes bore into hers. "I always know what I want. I want you. So when you were upset, my only concern was making it right. Life is too short to let a misunderstanding or some foolish jealousy lead to lifelong regret. It doesn't matter to me what anyone else thinks, as long as I have you." Jonathan's gentle tone made Nancy's pulse ease from a frantic gallop to a tranquil canter. Noticing her lips drawn into a thin line, Jonathan captured her hand, his words wrapping around her like a warm blanket. "Our personalities are as different as two people can be, like fire and ice. You can be tempestuous and unpredictable. I can be cold and demanding. It's your prerogative to run off, and it's my duty to coax you back." His words hit her like a wave, leaving her thoughts tumbling in disarray. Her face flushed, and a treacle-sweet sensation coursed through her veins, flooding her senses. With a gentle touch, Jonathan stroked her hair. "So, are we back on the same team?" She bit her lips coyly, but allowed him to use her hand to navigate her phone and unblock him from her social media. Their moment of reconciliation was punctuated by the waiter returning with their meal. Snuggled in Jonathan's arms, Nancy felt totally unburdened for the first time in days. She dug into the food ravenously, not realizing that Jonathan never took a bite. He simply watched her enjoy herself, with a serene smile stretched across his face from beginning to end. When Nancy finally finished, she patted her stomach and grumbled, "I'm such an idiot. There's no way I'll be able to sleep after a meal that big. It was just too good." A gleam lit up Jonathan's eyes. "Then don't go to sleep yet. Let's see another movie." The theater was only a few blocks away, and as they meandered through the park, a few passerbys gawked and pointed at Nancy. Her heart fluttered with fear of being recognized. She was semi-famous now, and without anything to hide her identity, she suddenly felt as exposed as a deer in the headlights. Reading her hesitation, Jonathan bent down and hoisted her into his arms in one swift motion. Her face flamed with embarrassment, and she shouted in protest. But Jonathan took off running. With no other option, she buried her face in his powerful shoulder. When they finally got inside the theater, they chose the sanctuary of the last row. The film opened with a thrilling chase sequence, but as Nancy leaned in to watch, Jonathan pulled her close. His fingers wove through her hair, and he coaxed her chin up until his lips claimed hers. Their countless previous kisses had done nothing to prepare her for the force of his desire. She pushed against him, but he held her firmly. His embrace was thrilling in its totality, and it sent a wave of electricity through her entire body. He didn't rush the kiss. Instead, he gradually stole her breath away, compelling her to seek his in return. The movie's surrounded sound filled her ears and amplified her pulsating senses. Utterly overwhelmed, she melted into the heat of his kiss. Suddenly, Jonathan's voice echoed in her ear, gravelly with desire. "Maria, promise me you will stay away from Brock. His family is trouble, the kind I can't always protect you from." She started to object, but he silenced her with another enveloping kiss. When the movie ended, Nancy stepped into the cool night air, her lips swollen from their passionate interlude. She had no idea what the movie was about, but the memory of their heated exchange was seared into her mind. She studied her reflection in the car's rearview mirror and frowned in frustration. "I've got another ad shoot first thing in the morning. How the hell am I supposed to get this swelling down before then?" Jonathan smirked. "You know a lot of people pay good money to have lips that plump." "Oh, so I'm supposed to thank you now?" "If you see fit." "Fat chance." He leaned over to give her swollen lips a playful peck. She bit him, and he jolted back, laughing at her unexpected vengeance. Fire and ice, just like always. Meanwhile, Brock was finally leaving the Diamond Club. He had been coaxed back inside for another drink, and then promptly ensnared in an unending business pitch from a drunken patron. Once he was finally free, he set off from the club. But as he rounded a corner in his car, a solitary figure caught his eye. A girl was squatting by the roadside under the eerie glow of a lone street lamp. Her short hair shimmered, but her face was concealed between her knees, her shoulders unmoving. His initial instinct was to keep driving, but he suddenly realized that her dress was familiar. It was the woman Austin had taunted in the elevator. Intrigued, Brock ordered his driver to stop. He got out of the car and approached her, stopping a couple yards away. "What's got you down, sweetheart? Need a ride somewhere?" Hannah looked up, and a wave of recognition flooded her face. She scrambled to her feet and suddenly swayed. Just as she was about to fall, he rushed in to catch her. She stared at him like he was her long-lost love, and her voice came out as a fragile whisper. You came back for me?" Brock remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. He was certain he had never seen this woman before tonight. Suddenly, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Why are you here?" she whispered. She reached out tentatively, and her fingers gripped the edge of his lapel. "I held on to you like this the first time we met. Remember?" Brock still didn't respond, his gaze scrutinizing her for everything he might recognize. Can you take me home?" Her voice was desperate, and he felt he had no choice. His eyes narrowed, and he nodded. "All right." She clung to Brock's lapel and staggered toward his car. When she nearly fell, he scooped her up effortlessly and deposited her in the back seat. As he climbed in, he snapped at his driver and raised the partition. "Take us to the hotel." Throughout the drive, Hannah maintained her firm grip on him, refusing to let go, even when they reached the hotel. When they finally made it to his room, she tried to kiss him, but he pushed her away. "You should shower." Hannah sniffed at her clothes, then stumbled towards the bathroom. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the soft echo of falling water. Brock leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the armrest of the sofa, as if he was weighing something heavy in his mind. The sound of water ceased, and after a beat, the bathroom door creaked open. Steam billowed out, slowly revealing the woman in the doorway. She wore a short pink robe that hung open in the front and spoke in a seductive voice. But the words she said made his blood run ice cold. "Okay, Jonathan, I'm all clean." Brock's eyes narrowed at the sound of Jonathan's name. In the fog of her drunkenness, Hannah had clearly mistaken him for his rival. And there she was, leaning casually against the doorframe, exuding an aura of mystery and allure. Brock slowly stood and stepped toward her. Her eyes held a storm, a maelstrom of longing and restraint. The air thickened with tension until Hannah took an unsteady step forward. Brock reached out instinctively to support her, and she leaned against him, breathless and dizzy. "Why are you here?" Her voice was barely audible. "I thought you were with—" She buried her face in his chest, then suddenly pushed him away. "You need to leave. I've wanted this for too long, and I can't bear the thought of it happening this way." His voice was a velvety hum. "Really? If I decided to stay, what would you do then, Hannah? Have you always had this secret, burning affection for me?" Her face drained of color, and her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. "Jonathan, don't make me say it. I don't want to ruin what we have." With a surprising surge of determination, she pushed him away again. "Go, now. We'll forget this ever happened." Brock's gaze bore into her as she crumpled to the floor. He wondered how he might use this mix-up to his advantage in dealing with Jonathan, and mulled over the information that his assistant had sent him while she was in the shower. Hannah was 24 years old, and the last remaining heir of one of the country's most powerful families. The weight of the world sat on her young shoulders, and to make matters worse, the burden was thrust upon her when her older brother Anthony tragically died. Anthony had been Jonathan's closest friend as a child, closer even than Xavier and Latham. But a helicopter accident claimed his life at the age of 18. Hannah survived the crash, but after watching her brother die in her arms, she retreated into a shell of silent depression. Jonathan, presumably feeling responsible for her, gradually brought her into his friend group. By all accounts, the transformation had been striking. From a grieving sister to a vivacious, cheerful young woman, she quickly became a well-liked presence among the city's elite. Just as Brock was about to speak, his gaze fell on her tear-streaked face. Her silent, unshakable tears struck him harder than the loudest sobs. His fists clenched at his side, only to slowly uncurl. "I'll get going. You should get some rest." Brock collected his suit from the table, nonchalantly draping it over his shoulder before striding out of the room. As the door swung shut behind him, he heard a threadbare whisper. "Good night, Jonathan." The next morning, Hannah awoke to a throbbing headache, a painful reminder of the previous night's excess. She pulled herself upright and discovered she was in a room she didn't recognize and dressed only in a bathrobe. This realization sent a jolt through her, and she threw the sheets back to inspect her body. With a sigh of relief, she concluded she'd gotten to bed safely. As she searched for her phone and her clothes, she grappled with her memory of the night before. She recalled stumbling near the Diamond Club and sitting down to rest. But then, him. A chill shot down her spine. Has it really happened? And if it had, what had she said to him? Her heart was thrown into a raging sea, bobbing up and down in the turmoil of fear, uncertainty, and desire. She spent the entire day hiding in her hotel room, and when she finally stepped out, she learned that her bill had been mysteriously settled. Having just arrived at the Davis Group headquarters, Nancy was engrossed in drafting a report when she was interrupted by a call from Steve's assistant, Travis. She debated ignoring it, but decided it was best not to ruffle any feathers. Upon entering Steve's office, she was greeted by the sight of meticulously stacked documents and a suitcase. Without looking up, Steve explained. "I'm leaving on a business trip to rural Mexico. I'll be gone at least 6 months, possibly more." Nancy froze, stunned. Jonathan's vague mentions of a new project suddenly fell into place. "You're spearheading the Mexico project?" Steve confirmed with a nod. "That's huge! Congratulations." "Thank you." He finally looked up, and they locked eyes. His expression was tentative, and Nancy got the distinct impression he was holding something back. She glanced at his packed suitcase. "When do you leave?" "My car is waiting downstairs." "Did you need something from me, or—" Steve cut her off. No, I'm all set." Nancy narrowed her eyes. Then why had he told Travis to summon her? She watched as he neatly tucked the last document into his suitcase and secured his laptop. He looked at her and smiled bitterly. "I guess I should be going." Nancy blinked, and her eyes went wide as a thought struck her. "Wait," she blurted. I have something for you in my office. Let me get it." Without pausing for his response, she sprinted out of his office. The distance from the main building to hers was substantial, and by the time she got back to the CEO's floor, she was panting for breath, and a thin layer of sweat covered her face. She puffed victoriously as she burst through the door. "Made it! Just in the nick of time." Her voice choked in her throat as her gaze fell on Steve. He had been in the midst of changing and was wearing only his underwear. "Oh my God!" Nancy spun around, instantaneously blushing. "Why didn't you lock the door?" "Why didn't you knock?" Nancy started to leave, but Steve's voice halted her, an unexpected softness to it. "Wait, please don't go." His words hung in the air as he quickly put his pants and shirt on. Nancy caught a glimpse of his back in a nearby mirror and momentarily gaped. He lacked Jonathan's size, but his muscles were still immaculately toned. Finally, he buckled his belt and turned around. "Done." Nancy turned to face him and stumbled over her words. I'm sorry I didn't knock. I just didn't want you to miss your flight." His eyes scanned her face, and Nancy couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him today. The air felt dense, charged with emotion. Nancy eyed him warily before extending a bottle of cologne towards him. "I have your blend from Sabrina. I tried it yesterday. It really does smell amazing. I think it'll suit you perfectly." He accepted it with a polite nod and gazed at the bottle. The quiet stretched out between them, and Nancy sighed inwardly. Steve had always been a man of few words, but his icy exterior had finally seemed to thaw somewhat. He'd even defended her in front of Jonathan. The shifting dynamics left her uneasy, and it suddenly occurred to her that the timing of Steve's long assignment in Mexico might not be a coincidence. Nancy finally spoke again. "Well, I won't keep you. If there's anything I can ever help with, just—" Before she could finish her sentence, Steve reached out and pulled her into an intense hug. She was caught off guard, and her heart pounded in her ears. Just as she was about to wriggle free, she heard his voice. It was a velvety, seductive whisper. "Thank you, Maria." With that, he released her from his grip, beckoned Travis over with a curt wave, and proceeded to the elevator. Before Nancy knew it, it was September again, and her final year at NYU had begun. She managed to convince her advisors to treat her work at the Davis Group as a multi-unit independent study, so she wouldn't even have to attend daily classes. More importantly, the day had finally arrived that she'd instruct her old colleagues from the Franklin Group to meet her at the new lab. She rose with the sun and headed to the base, anticipation humming in her veins. As morning light began to bathe their sprawling workshop, her phone suddenly rang. She lifted the receiver, her palms slick with nervous sweat. "Hello? This is security. I have a Professor Benedict here who says—" Nancy couldn't hold back her delight. "Yes! Thank you. He's one of our new engineers. Please let him in. I left a list of names at your station. Please escort anyone else who arrives directly inside." She hurried outside to meet Professor Benedict, and as she turned the corner toward the main entrance, she saw a middle-aged man strolling through the gates, his boyish air undiminished by time. When he finally stepped up to Nancy, he narrowed his eyes, and his surprise manifested in a stutter. "Wait, aren't you—" Nancy cut in. "Yes, we crossed paths in Houston." Her eyes shimmered with bravado, but before she could go further, a new voice sliced through the air. "Professor B?" It was Amanda, approaching with a casual swagger that belied her pantsuit. With a gleeful laugh, she enveloped the professor in a tight embrace. "Well, if it isn't the king of the nerds himself." Her gaze then shifted to Nancy, and her expression sobered. "And you are?" A single tear streaked down Nancy's cheek. "I sent the email. When Peter and the others get here, I'll explain everything." The rest of their comrades eventually sauntered in, and time suddenly seemed to slow down. Their collective entrance looked like a grand processional, with the bright sunlight casting long, intimidating shadows across the floor of the lab. After more emotional greetings, the group's attention inevitably turned to the only unrecognizable face in the room. Nancy. She took a deep breath. I suppose you're wondering why I brought you here. She grabbed a sheet next to her and yanked, revealing the gleaming, fiery red phoenix that Jonathan had bought for her. A collective gasp echoed through the room, and Nancy continued. I've tested everything. The touch-sensitive seats thanks to Mark, the adaptive climate control thanks to Eduardo. Collision detection is exactly as efficient as it was 3 years ago, and the AI is fluent in over 100 languages, even Pig Latin, for you, Jeff. She winked at him, and everyone laughed. But Peter's eyes suddenly hardened, and his spine stiffened. I just have one question. Who the hell are you, Maria? All of Nancy's comrades stared at her, waiting for an answer as to how a 20-year-old colleague could possibly have all the information she possessed. A bittersweet smile played on her lips, and her eyes brimmed with tears. It's me. I'm Nancy. Nancy's confession echoed in the stunned silence of her comrades. Professor Benedict was the first to speak, his voice hoarse with emotion. Why didn't you say something sooner? Like when we saw each other in Houston. It wasn't safe then, for either of us. Nancy's voice faltered as she fought back sobs. This was the most vulnerable she had been since her rebirth, but these were the people she trusted most in the world besides Esther. It was a perilous path, but if she wanted to bring down Stark, she knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned to Eduardo, the oldest of the group. He was a suave, Argentinian engineer who dressed like he belonged on a motorcycle, not in an AI lab. Eddie, how many hearts have you stolen now? Then she turned to Mark. Your son is in the 2nd grade, right? And finally, Jeff. Did you ever move out of your mom's house? Her words exuded familiarity and warmth, and after a brief moment of shock, an exuberant clamor arose. Arms reached out, pulling Nancy into an embrace that was a testament to their shared history. The circle of comrades was finally reunited. Their accents and skin tones were as varied as their pasts, but their minds worked as one. Behind them stood their greatest creation yet, the automated car they tirelessly developed as a team. And before them was the blank canvas of their sprawling laboratory. What had been torn away from them so cruelly suddenly fell within their grasp once more. After catching up on everything they'd missed, Nancy and her team explored the lab. As their collective gaze swept over a sea of workstations, Mark bounded up to one of them and thrust a USB stick into its port. A devilish grin pulled at the corners of his mouth. Hey everybody, feast your eyes on this little gem. The group closed in around the screen, and Mark's simulator blinked to life. Gasps of awe echoed around the cavernous space. I see those raised eyebrows, Mark teased. 3 years, and not a moment wasted. Say hello to our brand spanking new operating system. Totally proprietary, completely secure, and ready for deployment. Before the collective wonder had a chance to dissipate, Jeff swaggered over to his own USB drive. My turn. He plugged the drive in, and the screen morphed into a dazzling wireless comms interface. A symphony of impressed murmurs ensued. This code can turn any chip with an antenna into a wireless node, with transfer speeds as fast as anything. All that clunky sensor wiring is a thing of the past. Amanda unconsciously spun her bracelet on her arm. Holy hell! The car is going to be telepathic. Well, if you think that's cool, I've got mine right here. She pulled out another hard drive and held it up. I've been working at Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and just so happened to be on the advanced materials team. Want the recipe for ultralight paneling that never dents? Come to Mama. Eduardo cracked a rare, toothy grin. So much for sleeping tonight. He slid the skull ring from his finger and held it aloft. Everyone looked at each other, stumped. Nancy stepped in. No offense, Eduardo, but that would look terrible on me. Eduardo winked at her. Looks like any old ring, right? Wrong. It's a 40,000 milliamp battery with inductive charging. With a little work, we can power a car with a battery the size of a briefcase. A collective titter rose, and everyone turned to Professor Benedict. Peter's hand landed heavy on his shoulder. Your turn, Mr. B. You didn't come empty-handed, did you? I'm afraid to say I didn't bring any tech with me. Benedict paused, and the air seemed to suck out of the room. Then he cracked a smirk. Because some of us still use paper. He held up his briefcase. My latest research on the electrospun nanofibers. Laughter cascaded off the walls as Mark adjusted his glasses, a faraway look clouding his eyes. I always knew we'd find our way back together. He pulled a tiny toy car out of his pocket and set it on the top of a workstation, a symboling of unwavering belief. A hush fell over the group, and all eyes were drawn back to the simmering tears in Nancy's eyes. Benedict took her by the shoulder. Well, Nancy, where do we start? Managing to smile through her tears, she gently corrected him. It's Maria now. Amanda winked at her. Good. I never liked the name Nancy anyway. Nancy elbowed her and laughed, wiping her eyes. Well then, I say we pick up where we left off. With a few taps on her phone, the car on the other side of the lab sprung to life and glided over to them. Jeff's eyes were as wide as saucers. Imagine if Stark hadn't been such an idiot. We'd be cruising in the 4th generation by now. Mark ran a loving hand over the car's exterior. It's not over till it's over. We can still catch up. Jeff arched an eyebrow. Damn, at least buy the car a drink before you fondle it like that. I created her. I'm allowed. Might want to check your phrasing there. Nancy found herself laughing yet again, and nostalgia rushed over her like a tidal wave. It felt just like old times. The camaraderie, the banter, the endless nights of instant noodles and testing tables. Let's see what the Franklin group managed to do without us, or whether they've been stuck in neutral. Nancy winked and opened a tool cabinet. Peter grabbed a wrench with a gleam in his eye. Dismantling a car is like great sex. The satisfaction is godlike. Professor Benedict swatted him on the head. There's a young lady present. You really shouldn't talk about Jeff that way. With that, they descended upon the car. Jonathan was reading a brief when a sharp knock echoed through the quiet expanse of his office. Jack walked in looking concerned. I've got news from the lab in Brooklyn. Thought you'd want to know. Jonathan halted mid-motion, lifting his gaze to meet Jack's. The silent question hung in the air. 6 new people arrived this morning, none of them from within the company. All engineers from what I can tell, but a mixed bag of nationalities and ages. The youngest looks fresh out of college. The oldest is at least 40. They all seem to have a connection to Maria. And guess who showed up too? Peter. They're all thick as thieves. A hint of a frown tugged at Jonathan's lips. His gaze sharpened as he gave a curt nod for Jack to continue. I got all this from the security guard. Maria gave him a list with all their names on it and said they get a free pass, in and out at any time, and full access to all materials and research. She's got them in the garage right now, elbow deep in that car you gave her. You want me to check them out? Jonathan's fingers drummed a staccato beat on the polished table, the knotted veins in his hand betraying his mounting tension. No need. I told her that she and Peter would be in complete control of the lab. We'll honor her decisions. For now. With a quick nod, Jack excused himself from the room. As his footsteps receded down the hall, Jonathan's office descended into a deafening silence. He lifted his phone and called Maria, but it quickly went to voicemail. His mind raced. How did a mere college student know engineers from all over the world? And why, after everything, did she still insist on being as withholding as possible? What had she ever asked for that he hadn't given her? What had she ever told him that he hadn't treated with the utmost respect? His afternoon was consumed by back-to-back meetings, but he struggled to focus on any of them. Continually glancing at his phone, he always found it barren, devoid of any messages from Maria. Unease washed over him, and he abruptly called an end to his last meeting. As he made his way out of the office, he placed another call. By this time, it was a different number. Hey, Latham, fancy a drink? Back at the base, Maria was neck-deep in the guts of the car. She was dressed for the mess, in dirt-streaked jeans and a t-shirt smeared with oil and grime. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead as she diligently dismantled the engine, her phone forgotten on a workbench in the chaos of scattered tools and car parts. Suddenly, Amanda moaned and clutched her stomach. God, why am I so hungry? From his side of the car, Professor Benedict wiped the sweat off his brow and glanced at the clock in surprise. Damn, it's almost 5 p.m. The words made Nancy jolt up. No wonder she'd been feeling lightheaded. She grabbed her phone to order them food, and her screen blinked with a missed call from Jonathan. She called him back, and he quickly answered. Nancy spoke first. Did you need something earlier? Indeed. He didn't elaborate, and Nancy could tell something was off. Anything important? His tone was suddenly placid. Nope, just touching base. I'm still at the lab. I brought in some experts and we're in the middle of, well, you wouldn't understand, but we're making great progress. If you say so. Okay, well, I might need to burn the midnight oil tonight, so go ahead and have dinner without me. Already am. Nancy considered whether she should press him on his strange mood, but she felt too worn out to get into it with him. Have a good night, then. Mm-hmm. And with that, he hung up the call. At that moment, Jonathan was alone in his private room at the Diamond Club. He set his phone down, refilled his glass with whiskey, and immediately drank it, the liquor blazing a fiery path down his throat. He had long been fighting the instinct that some things about Maria didn't line up, but he suddenly felt he could no longer look away from it. Her strange combination of childlike innocence and professional maturity. Her deep-seated understanding of robotics and autonomous systems. And now, her global network of professional contacts. He had always told himself that she was just a special talent, a savant of some kind. But how did this otherwise average college student have professional relationships with engineers twice her age? Moreover, her transformation over the previous 6 months had been utterly baffling. From the shy, unhappy girl who followed Steve around like a puppy to the self-assured director of her own AI lab. It was all too drastic not to notice. Was her former personality just a facade? If not, then what was it? Her entire identity felt like a puzzle with missing pieces to him. As he topped off his glass again, the private room's door creaked open, but doubled back when he noticed Hannah hesitating in the hall. Hey, Hannah, are you coming? Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't spoken to Jonathan since that night at the hotel, and she still had no idea what she'd said or done with him. It took all her courage to mask her inner turmoil, and after a deep breath, she did her best to saunter in like nothing ever happened. Her eyes fell on him as he sprawled languidly on the leather couch. Hi, Jonathan. He offered a soft nod in response. And Xavier? Where's he hiding? Latham settled into a nearby chair, stretching out his legs. He's tied up with a dinner meeting. Couldn't make it. Latham's eyes latched onto the bottle in Jonathan's hand and flickered with excitement. Damn, Jonathan. You've been hoarding the good stuff? He grabbed himself a glass and passed one to Hannah, but she quietly declined. She sidled into another seat nearby, and her gaze slipped covertly to Jonathan. His face bore his typical stoic expression and betrayed nothing. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto her. Oh, Hannah, I have a surprise for you. Hannah's eyes went wide with fear, and her mind raced in anticipation. She finally managed to choke out a casual-sounding response. Oh, really? Yeah. We've got a new Thai chef on board today, and his food is incredible. Thai is your favorite, isn't it? It is. She was so relieved that she practically shouted. She scrutinized Jonathan's face, but she saw no indication of anything unexpected. Their camaraderie was intact and as comforting as always. In fact, it was exactly that comfort that kept her from ever voicing her feelings for him. The thought of losing it was unbearable. Her heart had soared for him since the first day they met, when he was just a lanky teenager that hung out with his brother. Her love had only flourished in the 15 years since, but for the sake of their friendship, the one that had saved her life after her brother's death, She vowed to keep it a secret forever. As the clock neared 9, Professor Benedict finally convinced Nancy to leave the lab. Esther had moved from her hotel to an apartment on the Upper West Side, and Nancy was so tired, she decided to stay at her old dorm instead. As she walked by the darkened park near her building, an unexpected hand shot out from behind a tree and yanked her into the shadows. Before she could even scream, a man's powerful kiss descended upon her lips, his breath heavy with the intoxicating aroma of whiskey. Nancy's fight-or-flight instinct nearly kicked in, but beneath the smell of bourbon on the man's breath, she detected a scent that was achingly familiar and deeply etched into her memory. There was no mistaking him for anyone but Jonathan. But what on earth was he doing at her dorm, and why hadn't he bothered to call? What if she had stayed out late or crashed at Esther's place? Nancy's thoughts scrambled as Jonathan's passionate kiss continued, wild and unrestrained. At times it was so deep, it felt like he was drawing the very life from within her. At others, he bit at her lips, leaving a sweet sting of pain. Nancy felt utterly powerless in a way that thrilled her. Ivy tendrils snaked around her feet, throwing her off balance and leaving her no choice but to cling to his neck. As she surrendered herself to the vortex of his kiss, a shockwave of realization sent a shudder through her. She was still wearing her grimy, oil-streaked work clothes. When she left the lab, she'd merely dusted herself off and washed her hands. Nancy thrust her palms against Jonathan's chest. "Wait, I'm covered in grease." "I don't care." His hand shot up and captured her wrists, pinning them above her head. His kiss was ferocious and all-consuming, as if he was trying to devour her whole. Suddenly, he broke it off. Panting heavily, he bent his head down to look at her. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, but she felt an uncomfortable chill in the air around him. Nancy finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Is something wrong? What happened tonight?" Jonathan's uneven breaths resonated in the heavy silence. He held her gaze for a moment before his lips curled into a grim, self-deprecating smile. "If something was wrong, would you even care?" Nancy's breath caught in her throat. Was he upset because she hadn't checked in with him today? Or was it because she hadn't mentioned Professor Benedict's visit? She wasn't sure if her crew was even going to make it. Besides, he said she and Peter had complete autonomy. Not having to ask for permission was the whole point. As a mirage of thoughts spun through her head, Jonathan suddenly released her, laughing mirthlessly. "Way to make my point for me." He turned on his heels and began to retreat. Seeing him leaving, Nancy was seized by a wave of panic. Before she could fully comprehend what she was doing, her body reacted instinctively, and she dashed forward, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "Please, don't go." His muscular physique was firm beneath her touch, and realizing she had never embraced him this way before, she suddenly felt nervous and exposed. Jonathan stiffened, seemingly caught off guard, but he didn't turn around. He slowly extricated himself from her grasp and continued to walk away. "It's not that I don't care. Please, just let me explain." Her words tumbled out in a blur, and Jonathan hesitated before stopping. He turned to face her, and a wave of relief washed over her. "I'm listening." His skepticism was evident, but at least he'd given her a chance. She chewed on her lower lip, considering her next move. "Let's go somewhere and talk." He responded with a non-committal grunt, so she continued. "There's something I need to tell you, something important, but I can't do it here." Jonathan's eyes flicked to his watch. "We'll miss the dormitory curfew." "Then I could stay with you." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, and his gaze was penetrating. "What exactly are you suggesting, Maria?" "Not that," she stammered, flustered by the misinterpretation. "I just thought, it's late, and a hotel seems silly." Without so much as a nod, Jonathan took her hand and guided her away. "Don't worry, my place has plenty of clean clothes for you." As they stepped out from the darkness, and Nancy saw their joined shadow cast on the ground before them, She couldn't help but feel a comforting warmth spread within her. Jonathan's car awaited them on the corner, and within 20 minutes, they were pulling up to his apartment building. As soon as they walked in, Nancy was greeted by a tantalizing aroma of blooming flowers. The house was bathed in comforting light, and despite the tension still hanging between them, Nancy felt undeniably at home. She gestured toward her soiled clothes. "I need to freshen up." Jonathan nodded and led her to a walk-in closet containing a huge assortment of new clothes, all perfectly tailored to her size. Her jaw dropped. "When did you buy these?" Jonathan shrugged. "Whenever I see something I think you might like, I pick it up. Apparently, I think about you a lot." Nancy flinched at his jab, but knew she probably deserved it. She was stunned that he had put together such an incredible closet entirely on his own and without ever mentioning it. Then he presented it to her like it was a totally normal thing to do for someone. She looked up at him, and in the closet's soft light, Jonathan's rugged features were etched in stunning detail. His gaze held an inexplicable gravitational pull. It drew her in, set her heart aflame, and sent a rush of adrenaline through her veins. Gulping down her nervousness, Nancy managed a tender smile. "Thank you, Jonathan. These are all beautiful." When Nancy finished her shower and got dressed, she found Jonathan absorbed in a novel on the plush sofa in the living room. She rolled her eyes. Of course he was reading War and Peace. She noticed that he was freshly showered as well, and that he had swapped his typical formal attire for a light robe. Perched on the couch, he exuded a warmth and gentleness that starkly contrasted his stoic and powerful public image. Nancy patted softly across the room and spoke softly. "I'm all clean." Jonathan looked up at her and tilted his head, and she suddenly realized how suggestive her words sounded. She immediately blushed, and in a haste to dispel the rising tension, she blurted out, "Are you hungry? I'm hungry." "I could use a snack, but unless we plan to head out, we're out of luck. The chef has the night off." "I can cook for us." Nancy's response tumbled out before she could give it a thought. Jonathan's eyebrows shot up, and there was a surprised glint in his eyes. "Are you serious?" "You don't think I can cook?" "I think you can do anything you set your mind to. I don't think you want to cook." Truthfully, Jonathan was right. Nancy had never bothered to cultivate any skills in the kitchen, preferring to spend her free time reading and working on her own projects. When forced to prepare food for herself, the only two things she ever cooked were instant ramen and grilled cheese. Having dug her own hole, Nancy decided to embrace it. "How about something simple? Maybe omelets?" Jonathan nodded, and an intrigued smile played on his lips. As Nancy walked towards the kitchen, she called over her shoulder, "Wait here. I'll call you when everything's ready." Once inside the kitchen, Nancy gave a sigh of relief as she quickly found eggs, cheese, and fresh vegetables. She pulled out her phone to search for a recipe and laughed at herself when she saw how condescendingly simple the steps were. 1. Cook the eggs. 2. Serve. She placed 2 pans on the stove and let the oil heat while she diced onions and mushrooms and whisked the eggs in a bowl. She started with the vegetables first, then prepared to pour the eggs into the larger pan. Unfortunately, she didn't realize she turned the stove up too high and was totally unprepared for the explosive sizzle as the wet eggs met the hot oil. Molten grease sputtered out of the pan and onto the back of her hand, and the sudden agony triggered a terrifying flashback. Emilia's crackling grin flashed before Nancy's eyes, and she suddenly felt like she could smell the sulfuric acid scalding her skin. Panic took over, and in her scramble to get away from the stove, she dropped the spatula, causing even more oil to leap out. She let out a shrill scream, and as she spun on her heels, she saw Jonathan dash through the doorway. She crashed into his arms, gasping for breath, and clenched his robes with white knuckles. Jonathan quickly checked her for wounds, but seemed to understand that whatever she was going through was primarily in her mind. He allowed her to cling to him and gently stroke her back in a comforting rhythm. Gradually, her taut nerves began to loosen, and her body subtly softened against his. He pet her hair and whispered into her ear, "You're safe. You're safe." Nancy finally leaned back and looked up at him, her tear-streaked face a haunting window into her fear. Her voice was shaky and vulnerable. "Jonathan, the fire, I thought it was going to consume me. I thought I could feel it everywhere." Her eyes shimmered with tears, and her delicate face trembled with terror. Jonathan kissed her on the head. "There's no fire, just a little oil. Whatever your mind is telling you, you can rest easy. I'll always keep you safe." His words hung in the air between them before he pulled her close again, gingerly raising her hand to inspect the burn. 3 angry red marks stood out starkly against the pale skin of her hand. "I'll get some ointment. Just have a seat." When he returned with the first aid kit, Nancy watched with wide eyes as he gently applied the balm to her burns. The combination of his warm touch and the cool sensation of the ointment soothed her panic. And as she watched Jonathan's concentrated efforts, she offered a quiet confession. "I'm sorry I freaked out. I was badly burned once, and now I'm terrified of the sensation. The oil just took me back to that moment." Jonathan looked up, his eyes narrowing in confusion. "But Maria, you have no scars. How could that be?" Nancy forced back the surge of old, terrible memories and took a deep breath. "Do you remember I said I had something important to tell you?" Jonathan nodded patiently. "Well, that's part of it. So is my new team at the lab. I understand why you were upset about it. You're probably wondering how I could possibly know those people so well. Maybe you even noticed my immediate connection with Peter." "I noticed, yes." Nancy's words choked in her throat, and Jonathan took her hand, gazing lovingly into her eyes. "If it's too difficult, you don't need to explain it now." Nancy shook her head rapidly. Jonathan had torn down so many of his walls for her, and she finally felt ready to start doing the same for him. He deserved it, and more importantly, she needed to prove to herself that she could. She wiped her tears, cleared her throat, and looked at Jonathan with blazing determination. "Jonathan, there's something you need to know about me.